The following is a fan-based discussion. All properties discussed are property of Toei Inc., Bandai, Hasbro, and Subaru Productions. Hello, everybody. Welcome back to a new episode of Tokutalk. Marcus and Jacob here. Today, we are going to be discussing Blue Rangers and writing therein and how they have changed in dynamics within the team that they play.
It's such an interesting thing seeing them from the Power Rangers perspective to the Sentai perspective. Although PR is dead. They love to, on that side, they love to make him the smart guy. That's a recurring thing because they can't let go of him in PR. So they keep trying to do Billy, but again.
Yeah.
In a lot of cases. Where they're just like, what if we made him the smart one? Or in Dino Fury's case, or in Cosmic Fury, it's like, what if we made him the evil one for part of Cosmic Fury? That happened. But a lot of the times they'll try to recycle Billy into a new person.
True enough.
You saw that so much in Megaforce. Jesus Christ, Noah.
Yep.
They did. I've seen it outside of it. He's a much better, not that kind of actor type of guy. Weirdly enough. We also don't have the ass kisser that is known as Kevin, but that was, just a holdover from Samurai, so what can you do? But on the Sentai side of things,
yes,
the Blue Ranger tends to be the cool guy.
Tends to be the cool one, the Lancer.
They tend to put this archetype, depending on the character, on other colors as well. A big one that ends up coming out, of course, is Change Griffin, where he was the cool one. Black Condor guy.
Yes.
They will put it on another one, especially if Blue is supposed to be, I guess, the younger of that team, sort of like he was in Denzi Man.
Jetman also springs to mind. With
yes. Well, yeah. And it's always a different dynamic when it ends up being a female Blue.
Which does not... How many times has that happened? Live Man, Jetman, what else?
Hurricaneger.
True, Hurricane Blue.
Zooger.
Shark.
It hasn't happened all that often.
True.
There's rumor that the next one might end up being female as well, which would be great because it's been a minute. But yeah, I do. It's going to be a thing talking about the Blue in terms of the second in command, the cool guy, if it's a male, or if it's a female, how she ends up being perceived by the rest of that team. Magic Ranger as well. But yeah, you see this a lot in Go Ranger, and this is something that they do end up keeping for a little bit. Although I will end up saying in something like Jacka, where the characters start to sort of blend for a bit there.
Yeah.
But Go Ranger, especially with him not always being there, his actor Hiroshi Miyuchi is not always there because I think he was filming parts of Zubat.
Jeez.
For a good portion of that
Busy
show.
Man.
V3 to Zubat to Go Ranger and then doing both and then showing up on Go Ranger's second year a lot more.
Yeah.
But
he was working.
Yeah, he was a very busy man around this time. He never really stopped. But yeah, I do love the cool Blue. You have Joe from
Gokaiger is one of the first ones that I think of when I think of the cool Blue.
Yeah.
I think about him and his rivalry that he has in the villain side.
Yeah.
With, I believe Barizorg was the character's name.
Yes.
And that rivalry, the fact that he's proficient as a swordsman, he always has the two swords that he's carrying with him. That's what he uses primarily in combat.
Yeah.
We almost never see him use anything range. It's always just, I'm up close and personal, I'm slashing the bad guys. And that's what I think of when I think of the cool Blue. Just because that leather jacket, the long hair, the color scheme, everything about him is yeah, this guy's cool. But
the cowboy hat in Power Rangers case.
True enough, but he does play
guitar.
I was gonna say I was gonna say as a good subservient, not necessarily subservient, but a good
second in command.
Second in command. Thank you.
Yeah.
To the Red Ranger.
Although, you end up having, it's not always the cool Blue. Sometimes you end up having the more bumbling Blue in some cases. Or the more childish version of it. You end up having somebody like Shoji from Die Ranger, especially. His whole thing was with the Three Stooges, and that was where a lot of his personality came out.
Kyoryuger.
Kyoryuger.
I think is a great example because he's always telling dad jokes.
Yeah, he was the old man. Ginga Man, Ginga Blue, who was the childish, a little bit more childish, the more innocent one, even though he got the love interest in that show with the teacher, or the flower shop owner. I can't exactly remember what she did. Baker, flower shop owner, teacher, one of the three.
Maybe it was all three.
Profession. That's what she did. She had profession. Blue from Cocker Ranger. They started to tend to give them more personality versus a lot of the Reds at that time. I feel like they were much more of a thing to actually latch on to. But once again, a lot of those Showa ones sort of ended up feeling the same. There was nothing really to make them stand out. Like, I remember nothing that much about... Well, no. Battle Fever, weirdly enough, is like he was the suave one. He was the hairdresser.
Yeah.
And it's one of those things where you're just like, oh, okay, I can sort of see where they wanted to actively do something with the blue to give you a little bit more something to latch on to.
It also shows, like, how does an attitude of, like, what could somebody be considered cool, how does that change over time?
Yeah.
How do you, nowadays somebody like Joe, back in Gokaiger, we had somebody who was very stoic and very just, like, met a few words, let his swords do the talking, and then you have somebody like, as you said, someone in Battle Fever, very suave, very fashionable, very stylish. Different dynamics there.
It's a very different dynamic.
And I mean, we talk about the cool blue, but I think we've already discussed with all the different varieties we've had, ranging from, like a young girl from, like, Akko from Jetman to somebody
who was a very... Well, she was a very good character. She had a lot to do towards the middle. She had nothing to do towards the end, sadly enough. True. But she was a very money-hungry character. She wanted to do something for money. And then her whole thing with the guy who would go on to be in Z Ranger. I think he played Boy. It was either Boy or Dan. The alien that came with the pink and blue mask.
Yeah.
Who ended up dying. And that's how they ended up getting Jet Icarus. Jet Garuda.
But I would say, like, from her, and then we have somebody like Ryosuke from Shinkenger to Yanmagast in King Oger. It's like, already we're seeing, just in those three examples, they're all very different types of people. Yeah.
But the female blues ended up being treated a lot differently. In some cases, like, Blue Dolphin was much more the motherly figure of that show. And that ends up being sort of reflected in Magiranger as well, where she was the warrior in that show. Because their mother was gone, she basically ended up taking on that role. She was the oldest girl.
Yeah.
So she ended up taking on the motherly role in that family. And it really ends up reflecting on how she worked forward. I mean, she got a husband at the end of the show in Magic Shine.
Yeah, there you go.
So... It's just all such an interesting thing. But, of course, like we always, you end up having your outliers.
It's weird to use the term outliers because, as we've already discussed, there's so many different versions of that character they can have.
Yeah, but they usually end up falling into, like, one of three camps in sort of cases. But the outlier I'm really talking about here is Q Ranger, who was very subservient to Red. He was a dog. And that was about it. Garu had no character, really, in that show.
True enough. I mean, outside of his introduction episode, he's, like, recruited to the team.
Yeah.
But it's like, I inspire you with my Red Ranger powers. And it's like, okay, off I fight.
And that's really his entire thing for the rest of the show. And it's boring. He's not a great character. He's probably one of my least favorite Rangers overall, in all honesty. Having that little bit of an outlier in that team as well, because we have a different shade with Sky Blue.
True.
Who's honestly,
it's a lot of characters. It's more than they've ever done.
It's
for the main team.
It's a much better character than the other Blue that's on that team because he has an actual thing to work with. And man, did I really like him in that show. Sky Blue is honestly one of my favorite characters in Q Ranger.
In how we talked about in our Red Ranger video, where the Red Rangers, a lot of times they usually tend to fall into one of two categories: loud man, or like a little more serious, maybe a little bit older, depending on who it is. In recent years, I think they've gotten a lot better with a lot smarter as well with how they write those archetypes.
Yeah.
With Blue and with like Lancer characters in general, if we're talking about like the 5-man band character trope.
And we're not talking about 5-man because we haven't seen it.
No, not yet. That's coming up.
Yeah.
But the way that they tend to be written, it's like they always seem to have a little more fun with it.
Yeah.
It's like, well, we have them as the Red Ranger as the focus. They're the leader. We know what we know right from the beginning what kind of dynamic they're going to have with the rest of the team. They're going to be our audience surrogate. And then we get to the Blue Ranger, and it's like, okay, well, we can have a little more fun with, or her we can have a little more fun with.
Or a Blue Ranger in like Zenkaiger or something, where he's very book smart, but he's also a worrier. He is a worry man to the nth degree. Or even in Dawn Brothers, where Blue is an asshole.
Well, I don't have any money, but perhaps I could recite you a haiku instead to pay for this coffee.
Dawn Brothers is always going to end up being an outlier to anything because near everybody in that team is an asshole.
Yeah.
So they're just the worst people you don't like. But they also technically end up having...
love them.
Yeah, you end up having a technical other Blue in that one with Sonoi. And
Sure.
I feel like it's a much more of an anime trope, but the red-blue love thing is such a... like... oh, these colors. These two match up. And that's what he did, because the New Age just like, what if... now, hold on. Gay.
Oh.
And he does it like a magic trick. And we're just like, oh! Every time. I clapped.
I clapped when I saw it.
But yeah, it's such a thing with blues where it feels like they have more room to go. Like actively go somewhere. And that's why it's a little bit harder to pin down some of the other colors, because blue ends up taking such a wide range in some case. Like a yellow, really enough, there is sort of a through line with yellows for a good portion up until a certain point. And we'll talk about that in another video as well. But it's one of those things where you're looking at it like, oh, okay. Yeah, I sort of get it with the blues. Like, where do we want to go cool guy? Do we want to go jokey man? Do we want to go the innocent one, the youngest one in some cases? And if it's a woman, you know, the motherly figure, or
the little sister.
Or the serious one in Zero Shark's case. And sometimes we end up getting, you know, the calm, cool blue, just like we did with Boom Boom Blue. Boom Blue, sorry. You knew what I meant.
I did know what you mean. It was so fun to hear you say it.
But yeah, they end up loving to have the cool one a lot with a lot of these ones. Kirame Blue ends up popping up as well, although he ends up being comedic relief half of the time for how cool he tries to be.
Yeah, I thought it worked.
The Clamp episode is still one of my favorite things with him, because he was just dying. And I'm just like, oh, I know that headache.
Yes, we all do. What is one of your favorite team dynamics when it comes to the Blue Ranger? Because two come to mind for me.
I can't do Dawn Brothers because it's just like, that's a team dynamic all in and of itself. But
I can still say it. It's one of your favorites.
Feel like, weirdly enough, Retsu from Geki Ranger, where he ends up being the much more serious person in regards to like
Compared to Wildman Jan.
But blue and yellow and white to a certain extent in that show don't do enough. Boken Blue. I actually do that. He's the cool one. He's the one who gets all the girls. He's the cool guy. But he doesn't feel like, oh, I was actively trying to go out and that's my whole point of my character. Because he's not always a good person either. And I really appreciate what they did with a lot of the characterization of the people in Bokenger on the whole. If I had to pick another one, I would honestly say Boom Blue at the moment.
Okay.
He's great. His relationship with Taya is really, really good. And I like how their dynamic ends up being shown. Also, he's Spy Man. And I do appreciate Spy Man. Which is something, I believe that was also from Boken Blue. So, really enough, that's the two that sort of pop up. Abba Blue, too.
Okay.
Abari Blue. Not Abba Blue. Operator Blue is the chiropractor, and we always sometimes need one of those. Although you do not need a doctor's license to become a chiropractor in America. Found that out.
Interesting. Well, that's something new every day. The two that spring to mind for me. We'll start with something recent, then I'll switch to something a little older. Gira and Yanma from King Oger. The way that Gira is essentially thrust into this world when, at the end of the first episode, he's essentially kidnapped by Yanma and taken to Inkospa and introduced to like a whole new world and how that kingdom is run and everything that happens in it. And the way they form that sort of surrogate sibling relationship, I think really works.
Yeah.
The way Yanma is definitely always trying to be the cool one, but sometimes he just falls flat on his face and it works to brilliant effect. Because they definitely try to have some Gurren Lagann moments with him where he's going to go like punch him and say, let's see it grit those teeth. And he goes to like punch him to knock some sense into him. And Gira will just like dodge out of the way or he'll trip and fall over. And it just completely misses, but it really works for those characters.
And the whoopee cushion?
That too. But yeah, just love their whole dynamic. Love everything about that show. The other one that really springs to mind, it's Shinkenger. Ryosuke from Shinkenger.
Ryunosuke.
Yeah, because he's just such a nervous wreck.
He wants
the contrast between, like as we talked about in our Red video, you have Shinken Red, who is very cool, very stoic, very much I am the leader, I am a cool stoic samurai, and then you have Ryunosuke, who is just such a wreck. This guy is such a mess. He is always just tripping over himself and screwing up and just panicking about everything. When that episode where one of the villains is like making everyone like fall over in like an anxious fit of panic, and they're all just like losing the will to live, and one of the rangers goes, "Oh my god, they all turned into Ryunosuke," and he's like, "Hey!" And it's like, you say that, but he's kind of right. Yeah, but I love you for it.
Yeah,
it's so interesting to see. Just the Red Ranger is the one who just completely has his act together. Just 100% of the way, he's just like, I am here to do this. I know what I have to do. I know who I am as part of this team. And I know what we have to do in order to save the world. And then,
I think that was Kotaha who said that. Oh my god, they all turned into Ryunosuke.
I think it was. And then you contrast that with his subordinate, who is just struggling to keep up at every step of the way, but
struggling with the will to live.
My god, he's always doing his best, but emotionally he is just such a mess, and I just want to give him a hug, and I love him for it.
I've been that. I resemble that.
As do I.
But yeah. Blues. Great times.
Mm-hmm.
Let us know what your favorite blue is in the comments below. What do you think about the archetype? Don't forget to join us for all the things. We'll see you next time. Bye, everybody.
Thank you for watching.